François Guillaume Guizot was a French historian, politician, and orator who played a major role in French public life between the revolutions of 1830 and 1848. Born on the 4th of October, 1787, he became one of the most influential conservative liberals of his time. Guizot opposed the attempt of King Charles X to take absolute power and instead worked to maintain a constitutional monarchy after the July Revolution of 1830. He later served under King Louis-Philippe I as Minister of Education from 1832 to 1837, Ambassador to London in 1840, Foreign Minister from 1840 to 1841, 1847, and finally as Prime Minister of France between September 1847 and February 1848. As Minister of Education, Guizot made major reforms that shaped modern French schooling. He passed a law that required every French commune to have at least one primary school, laying the foundation for a nationwide education system. As a leader of the political group known as the Doctrinaires, he supported a constitutional monarchy and defended the idea that only property-owning men should have the right to vote. His belief that citizens could earn political rights through wealth and education earned him both admiration and resentment. His famous phrase, encouraging citizens to enrich yourselves, became a symbol of his belief in progress through personal effort, but it also deepened the divide between his government and the working classes. When Guizot became prime minister, he faced growing opposition from reformers who wanted to extend voting rights. He banned their political banquets, public meetings that had become a key form of protest, and this decision sparked the February 1848 revolution. The uprising forced King Louis-Philippe to abdicate and led to the creation of the French Second Republic. Just days before his fall, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels mentioned Guizot in the Communist Manifesto as one of the symbols of the old liberal order standing in the way of revolutionary change. Guizot was born in Nimes to a Protestant bourgeois family. When he was only 6 years old, his father was executed during the Reign of Terror, leaving his mother to raise him alone. She moved with her son to Geneva, where he received a Calvinist education, but was also influenced by the ideas of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. She believed, like Rousseau, that every man should learn a practical skill, so Guizot learned carpentry and even built a table that was later kept as a family treasure. In 1805, Guizot moved to Paris and, at 18, became a tutor in the household of Monsieur Stapfer, a former Swiss ambassador to France. Through his writing for a journal edited by Jean-Baptiste Antoine Suard, he gained access to Paris's literary circles. His review of Chateaubriand's The Martyrs in 1809 earned praise from the author himself, and Guizot continued to write for various periodicals. During this time, he met Pauline de Moulins, a fellow writer for Suard's journal. When she fell ill, Guizot secretly continued her work under her name, and their collaboration led to affection. They married in 1812. Pauline died in 1827, leaving behind one son, François, who died young. In 1828, Guizot married Elisa Dillon, his late wife's niece, who was also a writer. They had 3 children, Henriette, Pauline, and Guillaume, 2 of whom later became authors themselves. Guizot's intellectual circle included historian François Mignet, with whom he helped develop the idea of the bourgeois revolution. Guizot also formed a deep and lasting friendship with Princess Dorothea Lieven, the former Russian ambassadress in London, whom he met at a dinner in 1837. Their relationship grew into an affectionate intellectual partnership lasting nearly 20 years, and they exchanged thousands of letters. Her political connections in both England and Russia greatly aided his diplomatic work. During Napoleon's empire, Guizot focused on his literary career. He published a collection of French synonyms in 1809, an essay on fine arts in 1811, and a French translation of Edward Gibbon's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire in 1812. These works earned him recognition and led Louis Marcellin de Fontenay, the head of the French university system, to appoint him to the chair of modern history at the Sorbonne. His first lecture, delivered in December 1812, boldly avoided any flattery towards Napoleon, which was unusual at the time. His lectures helped launch a revival of historical research in 19th-century France and established his reputation as both a scholar and a liberal thinker. After Napoleon's fall in 1814, Guizot was appointed Secretary General of the Ministry of the Interior under King Louis XVIII. However, when Napoleon returned from exile in 1815, Guizot resigned from public office and returned to his academic and literary work. This early balance between scholarship and political engagement would define his long and complex career as one of France's most influential intellectual statesmen. After Napoleon's 100 Days, Guizot went to Ghent to see Louis XVIII. Speaking for the liberal camp, he warned that only a clear embrace of liberal policies could secure the restored monarchy. The king's inner circle disliked this advice. Later, opponents used his visit to Ghent to brand him unpatriotic and mock him as the Man of Ghent. The charge was unfounded. He was trying to build a constitutional monarchy and to resist the ultra-royalists, not to save Napoleon's regime. When the monarchy was restored again, Guizot became Secretary General at the Ministry of Justice under de Barbé-Marbois, but he resigned with his chief in 1816. In 1819, he helped found the liberal newspaper Le Courrier Français. That same year, he was named Director of Communes and Departments at the Interior Ministry, but he lost the post when Decazes fell in February 1820. During these years, Guizot emerged as a leader of the Doctrinaires, a small group loyal to both the constitutional charter and the crown. They argued for a juste milieu, a middle way between absolute rule and mass democracy. They upheld liberty and toleration, but opposed the chaos they associated with the revolution. Their goal was to control disorder through a limited constitution based on middle-class voting and supported by strong writing and debate. They rejected popular radicalism, Napoleonic militarism, and royalist bigotry alike. Their influence faded after the July Revolution of 1830. In 1820, amid a harsh reaction to the murder of the Duke of Berry and the fall of Decazes, Guizot lost his offices, and in 1822, his lectures were banned. Even so, he became a key liberal voice against Charles Decazes' government, though he had not yet entered Parliament. This was also his most productive period as a writer. Between 1821 and 1822, he published lectures on representative government, along with a study opposing the death penalty for political crimes and several major pamphlets. From 1822 to 1830, he oversaw large source collections, 26 volumes of English historical memoirs and 31 volumes of French memoirs, a revised translation of Shakespeare, and essays on French history. He also published the first part of his History of the English Revolution from Charles I to Charles II, which he later finished in exile in England after 1848. The Martignac ministry restored him in 1828 to his Sorbonne chair and to the Council of State. His lectures made his name as a historian and became the basis for history of civilization in Europe in 1828 and History of Civilization in France in 1828, 4 volumes in 1830. In January 1830, the town of Lisieux elected him to the Chamber of Deputies, a seat he kept throughout his political life. In March, he delivered a speech calling for more political freedom. The motion passed 221 to 181. Charles the Tungex dissolved the chamber and called new elections, which only strengthened his opponents. Guizot returned to Paris on the 27th of July, 1830, as Charles X's fall loomed. His allies, Casimir Perier, Jacques Lafitte, Villemain, and Dupin, asked him to draft the Liberal deputies' protest against the July ordinances, while he worked with them to keep the uprising from spinning out of control. He believed that replacing the hereditary line was a grave setback for parliamentary government, but once convinced it would happen, he became a strong supporter of Louis Philippe. Appointed Interior Minister in August, he resigned in November. For the next 18 years, he stood with the moderate liberals, opposing democracy and defending a monarchy limited by and for the bourgeoisie. In 1831, Casimir Perier formed a tougher government, but he died in May 1832. After a major Republican revolt that summer, a stable cabinet finally emerged on 11 October 1832. Soult as Premier, the Duc de Broglie at Foreign Affairs, Thiers at the Interior, and Guizot at Public Instruction. Guizot was already disliked by the advanced liberals and remained so. Yet his talents were never more useful than as Minister of Education. The work matched his scholarly interests, and he knew the field well. He pushed through the landmark law of 28 June 1833, which set up primary schools in every commune. He revived the Academy of Moral and Political Sciences at the Institute of France, bringing back veterans like Talleyrand and Sieyès and adding new thinkers to debate political and social questions. He launched the Historical Society of France to publish major sources and financed large state editions of medieval chronicles and diplomatic papers. In 1839, when Louis-Mathieu Molé led an in-between ministry, Guizot joined Thiers and Odilon Barrot to block him. Their victory triggered a crisis and a Republican uprising. None of the three took office, and Guizot accepted the London ambassadorship, stepping away from the chamber. Arriving in spring 1840, he soon saw Thiers take over foreign affairs in Paris. Guizot was warmly received by Queen Victoria and London society. Admired as a writer, he favored Anglo-French friendship and peace. He also helped secure the return of Napoleon's ashes to France at Thiers' request. But he was new to diplomacy and arrived amid the fraught Syria question, where France had broken with the other powers. Distrust between Paris and its envoy left him exposed. Thiers ignored his warnings. The Treaty of the 15th of July, 1840 was signed without him and enforced against his counsel. War threatened until the king halted Thiers' militarization and summoned Guizot from London to form a government and lead a tenacious struggle against anarchy. Thus began, on 29th of October 1840, the long administration in which Guizot dominated for nearly 8 years. He took foreign affairs and, after Soult retired, became prime minister. He focused on peace and rebuilding ties with Europe. His success united the moderates behind him. Working well with Lord Aberdeen, he helped anchor the Entente Cordiale. British and French forces even cooperated in the Rio de la Plata blockade in 1845. When Peel fell in 1846 and Palmerston returned to the Foreign Office, Guizot feared renewed rivalry. A prior understanding on the Spanish Queen's marriage slipped. Suspecting British designs to place a Coburg on the Spanish throne, Guizot, backed by Louis Philippe, pushed a counter-move. The Spanish queen married a weak Bourbon relative, and her sister married the French king's youngest son, breaking earlier promises to Britain. Though hailed as a French success at the time, this episode wrecked the Anglo-French alliance, tied Guizot closer to Metternich's reactionary bloc, and harmed both the Spanish queen and Louis Philippe. At home, Guizot disciplined and unified the moderate liberals. His personal conduct was widely seen as honest and simple. He disdained wealth and died poor. Yet he did not hesitate to use lesser men's ambitions to secure votes and majorities. In 1846, when the opposition charged the government with buying votes, he admitted corruption existed and argued it could not be fully prevented. Comments that backfired as non-voters cited them to demand the franchise. He remained firmly opposed to expanding suffrage. Guizot's oratory was clear and forceful, best in defense. He excelled at parliamentary tactics and quick shifts in debate. His confidence grew with each victory, and he forgot that beyond the narrow electorate stood a broader people to whom both minister and king were morally accountable. His politics were rooted in history and philosophy. He had little feel for hands-on administration. Finance, trade, and military matters he delegated to allies such as Dumont, Duchâtel, and Bugeaud. Few practical reforms passed under his watch, and he ignored calls for electoral change. The king's prejudice against reform was unshakable, and the ministry yielded to it. A system that limited voting to about 200,000 men and filled half the chamber with office holders was hard to defend. A modest extension of the vote, such as tying it to land ownership, could have strengthened the moderates. Instead, the government met reasonable demands with a flat refusal. Warnings from friends and foes alike went unheeded until the crisis finally swept them from power. On the afternoon of the 23rd of February, 1848, King Louis Philippe called Guizot from the chamber to tell him that, given the unrest in Paris and the divisions within the royal family during the agitation for electoral reform, he no longer believed Guizot could remain prime minister. Guizot immediately resigned and returned to the chamber to announce that the government had fallen and that the king had asked Louis-Mathieu Molé to form a new ministry. Molé failed, and around midnight, Guizot, who had already gone to bed, was summoned back to the Tuileries. The king asked for his advice. Guizot replied that since he was no longer a minister, others must decide the course to take, but that the uprising had to be crushed and the barricades destroyed. He proposed giving Marshal Bugeaud full authority to act and offered to write and sign the order himself. Bugeaud agreed, declaring that he had never been defeated and would not start now. Thiers and Barrot, however, decided to withdraw the troops instead. Guizot went into hiding in Paris for several days at the home of a poor miniature painter he had once helped, and soon escaped over the Belgian border to London, arriving there on the 3rd of March, 1848. His mother and daughters had gone ahead of him, and he settled modestly in Pelham Crescent, Brompton. Although many in England disapproved of his recent policies, British society received him with great courtesy. A professorship at Oxford was even discussed, but he declined. He spent about a year in England, returning to historical writing. Back in Paris by 1850, he published 2 new volumes on the English Revolution, examining why it had succeeded and exploring its broader history, works that Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels later reviewed critically. After resigning as prime minister, Guizot retired completely from politics. He accepted that his public career was over and never sought to revive it. He spent most of the year at his estate of Val Richer in Normandy, once a Cistercian abbey. His 2 daughters married members of the Dutch De Witt family, whose Protestant values matched his own. One son-in-law managed the estate, while Guizot devoted himself to writing, his main source of income. In 1854, he published History of the English Republic and of Cromwell, followed by History of the Protectorate of Cromwell and the Restoration of the Stuarts in 1856. He also wrote essays on Sir Robert Peel and on religion. Between 1858 and 1868, he produced his 9-volume memoirs to serve the history of my time, along with a 5-volume collection of parliamentary speeches. Surrounded by his grandchildren, he began teaching them French history, which led to his final work, History of France Told to My Grandchildren, completed after his death by his daughter, Henriette de Witt. Guizot remained active in intellectual and religious life. He belonged to 3 of the 5 academies of the Institut de France and had helped revive the Academy of Moral and Political Sciences in 1832. He later joined the Academy of Inscriptions and Belles Lettres in 1833 and the Académie Française in 1836. He defended the independence of these institutions and influenced their membership for decades. Younger writers often sought his encouragement, and he worked to preserve the dignity of literature. He was also elected to foreign academies, including the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. In the Protestant Consistory of Paris, Guizot held similar influence. Deeply religious, he remained faithful to his Calvinist upbringing, but was free of its intolerance. His meditations on the Christian religion reflected his faith and moderation. He respected Catholic thinkers like Bossuet and Bourdaloue, whose writings he used in family prayers, valuing their moral strength as much as their theology. Guizot remained mentally vigorous until his death in 1874, passing away peacefully after reciting verses from Corneille and the Bible. In his early years, he had been admired by Europe's liberal thinkers. His works, History of Civilization in Europe and History of Civilization in France, were praised by Mill, Goethe, Sainte-Beuve, and Tocqueville. Though later critics saw him as conservative for opposing universal suffrage, he was in truth a defender of balanced government, standing between absolutism and radical democracy. He argued that political power should rest on reason and education, not privilege or passion, and he called for the end of capital punishment. His political ideas influenced later reformers across Europe, including Eötvös in Hungary, Thorbecke in the Netherlands, and Ortega y Gasset in Spain. Modern scholars such as Pierre Rosanvallon and Larry Siedentop have renewed interest in his thought, recognizing Guizot as one of the key architects of 19th-century liberalism.